Hey everyone, ACAT is here. This is the finished build of my Post Malone Wow cover, and today I'm going to show you how I used all of the techniques in my tutorial series to build this. Just before we get started, there are three main things you're going to need. Number one, patience. These take an awful long time to build and can be frustrating at times, but you must persevere. Also, you're going to listen to a song dozens of times during this process, so make sure it's one you like, or can at least tolerate. Number two, perfect pitch, or at least close to it. Now I'll be honest, I can't sing, but I do have a good sense of when a note is out of tune, and that's pretty important for your results. And finally, number three, a basic knowledge of music terminology. I will explain some of these things over the course of the video, but for anything I don't cover, a Google search will tell you everything else you need to know. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing I should mention is that I'm using Minecraft 1.13.2. The reason for doing this is because as a manual builder, it offers some extra tools that we can use to help speed up our builds and to help make sure that we've tuned our notes correctly, and I'll show that off a bit later. The first thing we're going to do is create a new world for our new song. So go into single player, you can see all of the songs I've done already. I'll show you this import world later, that's for getting the pixel art into the game. As you can see, that's a 1.12.2 version of Minecraft, so we'll get into that a bit later. So we're going to create a new world, we're going to name our new world for our song, we're going to be doing Post Malone Wow. It's going to be a creative world, and we don't want structures. We do want cheats because we're going to use the clone command. I don't think that actually counts as a cheat, but we'll still leave that there anyway. And we're going to turn that to super flat. So that's all we need. Create that new world. Okay, so here we are in our new world. The first thing we need to do is change a few settings because this is not a nice place at the moment. These cows are looking at me a bit shadily. So one thing I want to do first is just make sure that I'm pointing south. As you can see on the left hand side it says facing south. That's just because I keep all of my builds consistent. You don't have to face south, you can do this any way you like. But it will explain why I use some of the tools I do later on. So first thing we're going to do is change a few settings. So we're going to game rule. Do mob spawn? No, they do not. Game rule. Do they drop loot? No, that only saves us a second or two. Game rule. Is there a daylight cycle? No. Game rule. Is there a weather cycle? No. And this is just to make sure that when I do my recording, I'm not going to end up with a world that sounds horrible, has bad lighting, has rain coming down, which I think probably happened in one of my earlier videos and I had to re-record it. So doing all of these things will save a bit of time. And the last thing here is to stop tiles from dropping as well, and that just saves a bit of time cleaning up if we ever have to break some of our build and start again. So now I am just going to get rid of any background noise. We can do that by typing kill all entities who are not, that's the exclamation mark, is a not player. And I'm sorry wildlife. We just need to do that a few times because the slimes are springing off offshoots. And now we should be in a pretty nice and empty world. Let's just make sure we're facing south again. That's this way here. Brilliant. Right, so now that we've tidied that up, last thing we're going to do is just set the time to noon. You might have noticed that I'm typing these pretty quickly, and that's because in Minecraft 1.13 there is an autocomplete feature, which you don't get in 1.12, and it's one of the reasons I like to use 1.13. So time, you can just press S and then press tab, but it autocompletes the rest of the world for you. It also gives you all of the suggestions of all of the options that are available. It's particularly handy when auto-completing fill or clone commands, and some of those techniques I'll demonstrate a bit later and are shown off in my tutorial series as well. Okay, so now that we've got the world set up, the final thing to do, this is a global setting, so if you've changed this for a world, make sure you turn it back. We're going to go into options, we're going to go into music and sounds, We're going to turn the music off so that we don't have the background music from the game. We're going to turn block noise off as well, and that's to stop any piston noise for when we do our recording. Okay, so we've set up our world, but before we can get started on the build, we're going to need to do a bit of research on the song. What tempo is it? What key is it in? And what time signature does it have? Now, don't be worried if you have no idea what any of this stuff means. It just helps us get set up for our build. You can usually find this information with a quick Google search. Here is what I found for Wow. As you can see, it has a tempo of 100 beats per minute. The key is in B minor, and the time signature is 4/4. So let's start with the tempo. What does that mean? Well, 100 BPM means we have to space our notes with 6 redstone ticks between them. I'm going to leave a gap every 3 ticks so we can play some of the faster notes. So let's get the blocks we're going to need to get started. We're actually going to start building the drums, and I tend to use stone for that. We're going to get our note blocks. We're going to need our pistons and blocks of redstone a bit later, and I'll go into that a little more as we need them. We're going to need redstone. We're going to need redstone repeaters. We're going to need a button to start the whole thing. And we're going to need soul sand. And between the stone and the soul sand, we're going to make up our entire array of percussion. So let's start by laying things out. So as we said, we're going to leave 3 redstone ticks between every block. Just like that. So as we said before, it's 6 ticks between every beat in the 100 beats per minute. We're laying out with 3 ticks between each so that we can play some notes on the intervals in between. And there are ways to play notes faster than this as part of our build, which we'll show later as we need to. We do actually need to do this pretty quickly in this build, so that's what the piston and the redstone is for, and I'll explain that more. So that's the tempo. The time signature then is useful in helping you lay out your music. I won't get into great detail here, but 4/4 is quite possibly the most common time signature you will see. This literally means there are 4, that's the top number, quarter notes, quarter being the bottom number, in a bar. I tend to build the circuit to match the bars as it helps when it comes to repeat sections later on. So if you remember, we said every second note here is the 100 beats per minute. That means we need to do 4 of these second note intervals along the way. So we're going to do 8 blocks in our whole circuit. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And just fill the redstone in between. Now we'll come back to the key a bit later on as we need to use it. We don't tend to need to use it when building the percussion. Right, so let's get started with the drums. This is honestly my favourite part to build as it really makes the song. I have a standard way of tuning the drums in my songs, which I'll show you here. So to do a bass drum, I will tune a note block on top of stone, 5 beats. Now, one thing you're going to see a lot during my builds is the F3 window. If you take a look on the right hand side where it says targeted block, Minecraft note block, instrument bass drum, note 5, this tells me exactly how this note is tuned and what type of block it's on top of. So if I were to put a note on grass, you can see it says instrument harp, note 0, and every time we tune that, the note goes up. This is really powerful and really helpful when it comes to changing some parts of your song, or if you notice that a block is slightly out of tune, you can see exactly how it is tuned and go and correct that. Something you can't do in earlier versions of Minecraft, so it's another reason why I make sure I use Minecraft 1.13. So the next thing we're going to do is make a snare drum or a clap sound. I usually have this tuned to 5 again. We then use hi-hats. This is also soul sand, but tuned very high, all the way up to 24, which is the highest it can go, and also a cymbal sound if we're ever going to need one. again, I will use a snare block and tune it up to 18. This F3 window is probably going to stay open for most of this build now. Right, so these are the building blocks that we're going to use to make our percussion. So remember those, study them, see how they sound, perhaps look at my drum tutorial and see if you can build your own circuits and kind of have a bit of a play with it. Okay, so I have already done a bit of prep on Wow, so I can't play the song in this video because I don't have copyright to be able to do that. I'm able to post covers onto YouTube legally because those are marked and revenue shared with the copyright owner, so no need to worry there, but I can't stream the actual song itself, so I've had to do a lot of preparation off camera, but I will show you exactly how we're going to build the drums. So first thing we're going to start with is a bass drum. Let's tune to 5. I'm going to need another bass drum on the 5th block. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And there's also a slightly different bass drum noise used in the beat. If you listen to the song yourself and listen to the beat, you'll notice there's a higher pitched bass, and it tends to play here on the 4th. And I've done a bit of practice and set that to 16, and there's one here as well. Now you can hold down the right mouse button to tune these, or it's actually quicker to click it. I'll try to avoid clicking the mouse very quickly because it's probably going to pick up on the microphone quite a lot and it's going to sound pretty annoying. So I'll do my best. But if you do hear lots of clicking very fast, you know why that is. Alright, so the next thing we need to do is add our snare drum to the intro. The snare drum plays here. In fact, that's actually wrong. The snare drum actually plays here, and we actually have an extra bass note play here as well. At least on the first bar we do. Right, now we can put down a button and see how that sounds. If you've heard the Wow intro, hopefully you'll agree that it sounds pretty close to it. So what we're going to do now is build the next bar. So since we have 8 blocks and there are 3 intervals each apart, that's a total of 24 ticks. We need to make sure that the next bar is 24 ticks away. So 6 times 4 is also 24, so we're going to put 6 repeaters. This is the perfect interval for me. I prefer to make sure that each row runs 7 blocks apart. So if we have a gap of 6 repeaters and then we have an extra redstone in between, that's exactly 7 from that line to this line. And now we're just going to build the next block. Now the second bar sounds very, very similar to the first one if you've listened to the song again, but it's actually not quite. There's a few slight changes. The snare drum at the beginning plays alone and doesn't play with a bass note. That's this one here. One thing I actually missed on the first one is this first note is a little bit more pronounced. I'm going to play both the low and the high bass drum together. Now feel free to follow along with this, or perhaps just skip through slightly to the next bit. This won't take long. Right, and whoops. So the last thing in this bar is there are 3 notes that play very quickly. If you pop back over to the track and have a listen, you'll find that it plays quicker. Let me just tune that properly. It plays quicker than these 2 notes do together. So if I just play them as they are, one thing you'll notice along a lot of my builds is I'll place buttons almost everywhere so I can hear how things sound. Okay, so in the actual song there are 3 notes that play at the same interval that these 2 do. And this is where the piston trick comes into play. I've done a full tutorial on that, so I'm not going to explain it in great depth here, but just note that the piston takes precisely 1.5 ticks to extend. which is perfect when we have a 3-tick interval between blocks, as it means we get one extra note playing on a perfect interval between. Now this is something I don't believe that any of the note block editing software can do. I haven't actually looked, but again, I prefer to build these manually. I feel you can get a lot more out of it. So let's just hear how that sounds. And you can hear that it's exactly in between. If you tried to play this note after 1 tick or 2 tick, you would notice a very clear difference in the timing. So that's the first 2. I'm just going to go on and build the next couple. Now I've done a bit of prep on this myself, so I'm just going to go ahead and do this bit off camera and we'll come back once I've done. Okay, so now I've built the first 8 bars of the drums, which is the intro of the song. Let's take a look and see how that sounds. Notice the snare drum has been taken out of this section, as I couldn't hear it in the track, so I've taken it out. Now I use a pair of on-head headphones just so that we can hear the sound better. They've got quite a nice bassy sound to it, so I can pick up the notes a bit better than hearing out of TV speakers, for example. So it's worth picking up a decent pair if you want to analyse the songs a bit better. So that's the first 8 bars. Now the song breaks into a bit more of a beat, so I'm just going to build out the next bit and show you how that's done. Again, spacing 6, and we're going to need 3 in between every block. Okay, so the next bit starts with a bass, and then we have a snare drum here, and then bass drum. Now these are all tuned at the bottom level, so all at 5. We have another bass and another bass and another snare at the same time as this second bass here. Let's just test that. But that's not quite how the song sounds, because one thing that's missing is the hi-hat that plays throughout it. So what I'm going to do is replace this middle block with soul sand. I'm going to play that high one. So if a block in the middle here is powered, it will also power the 2 blocks either side of it. So it allows you to play 3 blocks all at once. One thing I try to do is keep my builds as flat as possible, so try and keep them on one layer, apart from the layer that the redstone and the blocks sit on. The reason for that is when the builds get quite big and we end up with sort of 5-6 layers, it starts to become difficult to hear some of the bottom notes due to the distance. So note blocks can be heard up to 48 blocks away, but they do start to get quiet. I think that after about 16 or 20 blocks they start to get a bit quieter. So it's best if you can keep your builds as compact as possible. So we're going to tune this all the way up to 24. And that needs doing on each of these, but I'm a bit lazy, so I don't want to tune every single one of those notes. So what I'm going to do is clone this first note, and we're going to take advantage of the autocomplete here. So when we start the clone command here, when 1.13, it lets us autocomplete. So if we're looking directly at the block we want to clone, we can just press tab, 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 and that chooses the first position, and then press space. And then we're going to press tab, tab, tab again, and that sets the start and end position, because we're only copying the 1 block, so we don't need a position any bigger than that. Now, for now, I'm going to just Control A and Control C to copy that, and then we're going to point over where we want it to go the first time. And now we can take advantage of the tilde key. This might be in a different place on your keyboard, so look out for it. The tilde key essentially says my current position, so it's my current, in this case, my current x coordinate. We want to set the y coordinate to be 4, so it's always at 4. That's the height from the ground, and then the z coordinate we're going to set to another tilde, so the current position. And if I press enter, that copies that block. And if you look on the right hand side, you can see that it's also copied its tuning, so it's already tuned to 24 for me, and I don't need to worry about tuning that again. Now it might seem like it took a bit longer than just going through and doing each one, but now we can take advantage of some more of the features of Minecraft. We press T to open chat again and press up. It uses our last command, and because we've set the tilde key to our current position, all we have to do is move over each one of these blocks, press T up, enter, T up, enter, just like that, and it's copied all of those blocks. So now let's see how that sounds. This is the actual beat of the song. That sounds much better now that we've added those snare drums in, which we're using as a hi-hat. I did originally used to use glass blocks as this, but I did get a lot of comments complaining that the ticking noise was a bit awful, and I feel like the snare tuned up to 24 is a little more subtle, so it's a bit more bearable to listen to throughout an entire track. The next thing we need to do is copy this for the next 2 bars, because it's exactly the same beat that goes. We could just do that completely manually, but that would start to take quite a long time by the time we get to the end of the track. So what we're going to do instead is make good use of the clone tool. So I've built a spreadsheet that helps me do this. And what the spreadsheet does is I put in the coordinates from each bar of the song. So we're going to look on the left hand side and find the x coordinate. And you see block -151, -144. The -1 is the x coordinate. We're going to check the next one. It should be 7 apart. So yeah, -8. This will be -15, -22, etc. We need to find the largest and lowest z values as well. So we have -141 here, and at this end we have -123. So I've gone one space over either side just to make sure we cover a little bit of extra room in case we need to use the space at the end. It just makes life a bit easier later on. So here is the template for Wow. I've created a copy from my base template that I have, which is what you can see right here. I will put a link in the description to the finished Wow spreadsheet so you can take a look at everything I've done in there. And I will also put a link in the description for this template, so I'll publicly share that, and you can use it to make your own builds. I'm going to go into a bit more detail about what all of this does in just a moment. The first thing we need to do, however, is put our Z-min, Z-max, Y, and our X coordinates in from our build. So if you remember, the Z-min is -141, the Z-max is -123. Since these are negative numbers, the one that actually is a higher value is lower because it's further away from 0. The Y coordinate is 3 because that's our ground level. The X coordinates of the first and second bars are -1 and -8. Now that we've got this in place, we can simply highlight this area here and drag this down, and that sets the coordinates, the X coordinates, for as many bars as we need. And we can continue dragging this. Make sure you select at least 2 rows at a time. If you just select the bottom one, it will just duplicate that. You select 2 rows and copy, and it will keep extending this on as much as we need to. The next thing we need to do is use this spreadsheet to clone from one of our previous bars. So the last one we built was bar number 9, and we said we needed to copy that 2 more times. So that means that bar 10 and bar 11 are going to copy from 9. So just populate that in there for now. This is pretty much the only field you need to enter here. The rest is a script which you can just copy down as many times as you need. So first of all, this looks up the X coordinate for bar 9, and this looks up the size, and this looks up the position for bar 9. That 7 and 5 repeats all the way throughout because I've since standardized my builds, but you can use these values and change them if you need to make things different. But as long as you're keeping your builds 7 bars apart, you won't have any problems. This then is a very long script which puts together this text. What that enables me to do is simply click here, Control C and copy, and then I'm going to tab to Minecraft. And now that we're in the game, I can press T, Control V and paste, and press Enter. And as you can see, it's copied our drums to the next bar. So then to copy the next one is just as simple. I've tabbed back to the spreadsheet, click on the clone script, copy it, tab back to Minecraft, go into chat, paste, and there we go. Now we've very quickly duplicated what we've already built. So some people might question whether this is cheating, but I don't feel so. We've spent the effort to build this once ourselves, and why go to the effort to build every bar identically over and over and over again, especially when you have a drum beat that repeats throughout the entire song. The next bar then is a repeat of the first one, except it has a few notes missing. But we can still use the clone tool to get there. So back to the spreadsheet, we're still going to copy from number 9. I'm going to copy all of these rows here, these columns rather, paste that in there, copy the clone, tab back to Minecraft, open the chat, paste it in, and then we just need to delete the last few notes from here. So if you listen to the song yourself, you'll notice that it only plays up to this 5th note. And then just to keep things tidy, I like to put things back as they were. So if we ever need to copy from this one, because we've got another copy of where the notes are playing only up until the 5th note, then we just simply copy from the 12th bar on our spreadsheet. Now the drums are fairly repetitive throughout the rest of the song, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to populate my spreadsheet and put the rest of this together, and I'll see you when we get started on the next layer. Okay, so here we go. I have now finished the entire drum section. I've updated the spreadsheet, which I'll show you again in a second. One thing to note though is that the spreadsheet doesn't have exactly accurate bars on it. I'll explain why in a second. So going through the song, you find that there's a lot of similar sections. So you'll be playing one part of the drums and it won't sound the same on the next bar. But save building the whole bit again, you copy the one before and then just make a slight tweak. Now I don't update the spreadsheet after I've done that, so if you were to just take the spreadsheet as is and copy this entire drum section, you'd probably find that it doesn't quite sound the same as mine. And that's because you would have copied some sections that then haven't been updated afterwards. So your best bet is to always go back to the original music, listen to it very closely, see how it sounds. YouTube has a fantastic feature where you can slow down the tempo of a song by clicking the cog and changing its speed, so you can go down to a quarter speed of the original track as well. That will help you analyze some of the notes a lot better. Okay, so let's take a look at the spreadsheet then. So here we go. Here is the finished spreadsheet just for the drums tab. You can see it's quite long. The entire song is exactly 60 bars long. It's quite common to find that a song is a multiple of 4 bars. So if you do get to the end of a song and you found that you've got to 61, 62, 63, etc., you probably need to go back and listen to the song because you might have missed something whilst going through. So as I say, some of these commands will have been copied but don't necessarily match the entire song. You can see here later I've copied from 12, so 12 must be a modification. I actually deleted the command out of that one, but there will be quite a few that if you copied this won't be exactly right. Now we've done our drums, I'm just going to set up the spreadsheet for the next section. I think we're doing the guitar next, it might be the bass. We can rename this if we need to later. And the only thing we need to do here is change the Y coordinate to 6 rather than 3. Just keep adding 3 for every layer. And by duplicating the previous tab, it means we've got all of the X positions in the right place, and we've got exactly how many bars we need. And what I'll tend to do is just clean up this script and just leave 1 in here so we can copy it as we need to. So one thing you might have noticed with the clone tool is that it clones everything that is 1 block to the left of the middle here and 5 blocks to the right. So I tend not to place any blocks in this last column here, just so that we don't risk accidentally playing it when we're not supposed to. For example, if there was a piston that was playing a note and the note was here, then when the redstone runs past this section, there's a chance that it might actually be triggered off of this note as well. So I tend to leave this row blank just to make sure. It is there in desperate measures if we have to do something very complicated with a redstone, which does come up quite often. So to start building our next layer then, we're going to need some building blocks. If you've watched any of my other videos, you will notice I'm quite a fan of the purple blocks and the purple theme here. The guitar for WoW starts on the 5th bar, so we can ignore everything from 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're going to start here. I'm going to place the first block right on top of the redstone. If I was to right click on the repeater here, then it would reset the repeater back to the beginning. We'd have to set it again. And we're going to match the area that we would clone with our clone tool. So 1 to the left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to the right. And by doing that, that means that when we start to use the clone tool on the spreadsheet, we don't have to worry about making sure that we've laid out all of the redstone and all the blocks we need. So now what I would tend to do is put the concrete blocks here all the way to the end and then fill the rest in with glass. And once that's done, all we have to do is add our redstone. Those should all be tuned to 3. Place that down and we're going to connect the two together. And if we want to test both bits together, I tend to put a button on the end there. So since we are doing guitar, we need wall blocks. I tend to just stick with white ones. There's enough purple in my build as it is. I'm just going to place those down. So the key, if we remember back, was B minor. And that means that on a scale of all the notes from A to G, the C and the F are played as sharps. So we would play B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G and A on the scale. And that helps when doing the next part of this. Okay, so this is Audacity, which is a brilliant piece of free software for doing anything you need with sound. So you can add effects, you can record, you can cut out background noise and that kind of thing. It's brilliant. And what I've done is I've hummed into my microphone. I find that humming gives me a better audio wave, which we'll see in a second. And that allows me to analyze the tune even better. So what I tend to do is have the song playing in my headphones and hum along to it as it goes, and then capture a small section. Once you've done that, you can highlight a portion of my hum, click on Analyze and Plot Spectrum, and it will tell you, tend to look for the highest peak here, which is often near the beginning. It will tell me what note this is, and this says this is tuned. You see where it says peak G3. So on our scale of D, E, F sharp, G, the F sharp and the G are pretty close there, so it could be both. Tends to be quite difficult to hum sharps and flat sounds, so I'm going to side with the F sharp in this case. This next note here, let's have a look. That says that's an A sharp. Well, A sharp isn't in the spectrum for this tune, so we're going to go with an A instead. We'll go on the lighter side because we've gone on the lighter side of the previous one. Analyze the next one. So I tend to find this sometimes with some of my humming, in that I get sort of two peaks at the beginning. Now if you look, they're both quite similar, so that's a D3 and that's a D sharp 4, so we'll go with this and call that a D. And finally, this should be very similar to the first one. You can see it kind of has a similar shape to it too. So that, again, is coming up with another G3. So that's F sharp, A, D, and F sharp again. So now back in the game, we can place those notes that we've just figured out. I've already figured out the interval where they should go by listening to the song, so that's pretty much all you have to do. The first one was an F sharp, which is 12. There is a great article on the Minecraft wiki which shows you how to tune notes all the way from 0, which is the first F sharp, to 12, the second F sharp, and then 24, which is the third F sharp. So there's 2 full octaves. The second note plays here, which is A. Then we have a D, and then finally back to F sharp. Let's just see how that sounds. What I will tend to do along the way is break one of the redstone in the circuit so that we can hear both of these sounds at the same time and not have to worry about the circuit playing on. Okay, so I've done a bit more off camera and I wanted to show you how the notes are tuned. The guitar section is actually very repetitive throughout the song. So I'm just going to show you the notes. This is the bit we put together already. So that's 12, 15, 8 and 12. The second section is exactly the same except it doesn't have the first note. So it's just 15, 8 and 12. The third section is slightly different. So it goes in the opposite direction. Instead of going down and then up, it goes up and then down. So we've got 8, 15 and then 7. So it drops a little bit lower. Then there's a gap because nothing actually plays on this bar. And so I've started another layer again over here and just needed to connect the redstone back up to the bottom. So this is the same. These next 3 are identical to those 3. So I won't show those again. And then the only difference is this 4th one here, which just has one slightly different note. This is an E, which is tuned to 10. So let's just play that quickly to see how it sounds. And that's going to continue on playing all the way into the distance now because I didn't break my redstone circuit. But that's pretty much the guitar section for the entirety of the song. Now, sometimes it comes in, sometimes it steps out, so you really need to now listen to the song and see which bars you need to copy and when. Of course, the spreadsheet will be fully updated with all this information. Since this is exactly the same all the way throughout, I'm now going to go and copy everything, and I'll see you just before I get started on the next layer. Okay, so there we have it. This is the entire guitar layer. As I said before, it's pretty much exactly the same thing repeated all the way throughout. In fact, there's no changes from the 7 bars that I showed you. There's just a few gaps in places where it's not playing, and then it sort of cuts back in. So now we're going to get started on the bass layer. The bass doesn't start till the 9th bar, which is just here. So we're going to do the same thing, extend upwards, set out our blocks, fill in the glass, and then place our redstone. And for the bass we're going to need wood blocks, so I'm going to place those down. And to save a bit of time in the recording, I've already done the work in Audacity to figure out which notes we need to play. So first of all, we need to play an F here. It's actually very, very similar to the guitar with a few slight changes. So we play an F there. We also play a note on the 4th, which is just a repeat. So that's another F. And then we play the same again as here, so 15 and then 8, but we don't play the last note. I'm just going to connect this back up. Now I can place a button back and see how that sounds. Now you could tell I've made a bit of a mistake there in the tuning, and it's just because I had one redstone repeater not set to the right tempo. Let's try that again. And that's the first bar, so I'm just going to go and copy that a couple of times and then we'll tune the 2nd and 3rd, which are actually slightly different. So I've set up a new bass tab on our spreadsheet, set the Y coordinate to 9, which is correct for this one, and I've set bars 10, 11 and 12 to all copy from 9. Let's just take this clone command then and paste it into the game. Now these bars aren't actually identical, so we're just going to need to retune slightly. For this bar, it's only the last note that changes, and this goes all the way up to a C sharp. On the second octave, that is, because there's a lower C sharp, which is only 7 notes. And now we're going to copy the 11th bar, paste that into Minecraft, and we need to change the last 2 notes in this case. This one changes to a E, which is 10, and this one stays the same at a D, actually. Finally, we need to copy the 12th bar, drop that back into the game, and this one's actually very different. It's only got the first note here, which is a C sharp. It's the lower C sharp this time. So just tune to 7. And I'm just going to tidy up some of these extra notes that get copied over. And that's our bass line. Let's have a look and see how that sounds. Just need to place this circuit back here, and we'll break this so it doesn't run on forever. And that is pretty much the bass line throughout the song. Now, similar to the guitar, it cuts in and it cuts out at places in the song. So I'm going to go ahead and build up the rest of the spreadsheet and then finish off the bass line. So I've gone ahead and finished the rest of the bass now. It was pretty much identical to the first 4 bars we built. However, there was one change in the 16th bar where it gets tuned to E, which is 10, 3 times at the end there, and it just sort of carries it on. The bass cuts in and out throughout the song, so you'll see these large gaps throughout. So here's another copy of the 16, and sometimes if you count 1, 2, 3, 4, see this is just a copy of the 12. The spreadsheet does have all of this information on and clones it pretty well. There will be one or few tweaks that you'll need to make to actually match the song. So again, best thing you can do is go back and listen to the track in a headset. My headset actually has a great bass boosting feature. So when I'm doing the bass, I can turn that setting on and it cuts out a bit more of the higher noises, it cuts out the melody and the singing a little bit and really draws out the bass from the song, so it really helps when trying to pick out the bass notes. So now that we've got the backing track ready for our song, it's time to put the final layer on, which is obviously the lyrics. You could play this as is and you've essentially got a karaoke version right now, but we're going to add the lyrics as I tend to do for every track anyway. The lyrics in WoW start from the very first bar if you include all the ad-libbing, and I tend to because it really draws out the accuracy of the song. So I'm just going to build up to the correct layer, so we need to go higher than the guitar and higher than the bass. So this would be the guitar layer, that's the bass layer, and then this is the voice layer. It should be block number 12, so we can see we're currently at block 13, so that looks right. And then I just need to build this up. So now that we've got our layer ready, we need to get some blocks that play a piano sound. There are a number of different blocks that do this. You can take a look at my instrument tutorial for more details. I'm going to go for diamond blocks, simply because they look nice. Now you can use different instruments for the vocals. I will tend to stick to piano if there isn't a piano actually playing in the track. Otherwise, I might tend to go for gold blocks, which play a bell sound, or sometimes even packed ice, which plays a chime sound. Now, for the ad-libbing, I'm actually going to use packed ice anyway, so let me just grab that. As with previous layers, I've already done the work in Audacity to figure out which notes I need to play, so I'm just going to place those down now. The challenge with this first bit of ad-libbing is it doesn't play at a regular beat if you listen to it against the track. So we have to adjust our redstone signal slightly to accommodate. Let me just place the first note down. and then by this block here, which is the last note of a 4-note sequence, we're going to need to play 2 other notes, but they actually play at a slightly different interval. And what I'm going to do is change this one to a 2, change this one to a 4. We can play the second note here after 2 intervals. And then we're going to add another note which plays at another interval of 2 after this note here. So then we have 4 equally spaced notes. So you can see the redstone is going to start from here, play this note, after 2 it's going to play this one, and that's going to shoot off 2 separate repeaters, one which is going to activate this note after 2 ticks, and then one which is going to carry on with the sequence after 4. You have to be careful when adjusting redstone like this, so that you still keep the same intervals towards the end of the bar. So what I've done here is I've taken 1 tick away from this repeater, and I've added 1 tick back to this repeater, and therefore by the time we get to this note, the rest of the sequence is playing in the correct time. So let's just play this and see if it's tuned correctly. There is more still to add to this bar, and I'm going to need to add an extra bar to finish it off, but just for now I want to see if these notes are tuned correctly. That sounds about right. And once again in our spreadsheet we need to build up another tab. So duplicate the previous tab, rename it, change the Y coordinates, and then tidy everything up. And I need to immediately clone the first bar just so we can build up the circuit a bit quicker. It's not a copy of the previous bar whatsoever, but it will save a bit of time in the build. And then we put that back into Minecraft as before, and then we've got the next one. And then I need to clean this up because this is not right at all. So I've tidied this up now and updated the first 2 bars so that they match the ad-libbing in the track. Let's just play that and see how it sounds. So let's just take a look at what we've done here. We've already gone through this first part here. This second one is an exact copy, it's just at a different position, so it starts from here, and again we've got 2 tick intervals from here to here and here to here. Then the correct interval, because this is already set up, occurs before this last note of that sequence plays. So even though this is a 3 tick interval from here to here, it matches what we've got at the start of every bar, so it's always going to be correct. And then we have another copy of it here, and it starts a little bit sooner. So we've got block tuned to 19, 17, 15 and 12. And again, you're going to see that same interval setting between the notes. So I'm going to go ahead and finish all of the main vocals, and I'll be back as soon as that's ready. And here we are at last. We've finished the song. The vocals are now complete. I had to use the piston trick almost every bar along the way to make sure that we can keep the rhythm going correctly. Let's go down a little bit and see how that sounds. I've set up a block here in the middle so that we can sort of start the song wherever we need to. You'll see that I do that in some places. Sometimes that's just to actually connect the circuit together because we need to move up to this layer. Sometimes it's just so that I can start playing the song a bit further down and see how it sounds. Obviously I'm not going to play the entire song now because that would defeat the object. You can head over to the actual recorded video and see how that sounds. The last thing we're going to do here is just tidy up the circuit a little bit, just so it looks a bit nicer. I tend to knock off any redstone that we're not actually using, such as here, and then at the end of the sequences like here as well. And there we go, we've now tidied up all of the endings and all of the starts here, so we've got no redstone or anything sticking out that doesn't actually need to be there. That will just help reduce any lag in the game a little bit when we actually come to do the recording. As you can imagine, the redstone circuit going off with all of these redstone repeaters and all of these pistons firing very quickly is going to cause a little bit of lag. One thing you'll notice about all of my other videos is I tend to put the same style of starting button at the start of the song. I just need to grab some glazed terracotta, and that's generally what I'll run the button on. So the way I tend to do this is to stick the glazed terracotta here, so just connect it to one of the pieces of redstone, and the button's going to be attached to the other side of that. So when you press this button, it's going to power right through and just hit this starting structure that we've already built. And then I just wrap some purple blocks around. Just like that. So when we go to press the button later, it's going to be ready. The other thing you might notice from all of my songs is I tend to put a nice piece of pixel art over in the distance here, so you've got something to look at just for the opening of the song. This is totally optional, but I am going to show you how I build those as well. This is Spritecraft. It's a brilliant piece of free software. I'm actually using the paid version. There's a few subtle differences. The paid version actually lets you set your max width and max height settings, lets you customize the blocks. I don't actually customize anyway, and tend to use the default values. It's very simple software to use. All you have to do is click Browse, choose the picture that you want it to convert into blocks, and then click the Create Minecraft Blueprint button. And it does it for you, and it's that simple. Then we're going to click the Save Schematic button and save it to the place that we want. And then head over to MC Edit. And if you remember that import world we showed right at the start of the video, this is one world where I tend to import all of the pixel art. It's a 1.12 world, so it works with MC Edit. For example, if I tried to go to one of my other worlds with MC Edit that's 1.13, click Edit, you get all sorts of errors. So we're going to have to load our 1.12 world. So if you look down the bottom here, we're looking north, and that's to make sure that we are matching the perspective that we're going to load into our 1.13 world. If you remember right from the start, we started building our circuit by facing to the south, so the pixel art is going to be facing north opposite that. So to import our schematic into the world, we need to click the Import Export button and go to Import, go to the correct folder, select the schematic file we're going to import, and then it drops into the game. We just need to move this into a better position so that we can copy it. So the ground level is always 4. And notice that the image is now flipped. I'm not sure exactly why that is, but MC Edit seems to do this when you import, so I make sure that I flip the image from left to right first, so that when it comes back into MC Edit, it flips back the correct way. I'm just going to change the Z coordinates a little bit so it's not over the top of Ariana there. And then we click Confirm when we're done. Now you can rotate these in MC Edit, however I've never had any luck doing that. Let me just demonstrate. If I change the Rotate Y to 180 degrees, it rotates, and that looks great, right? Until I click the Confirm button, and the whole thing disappears. And then I can't import it, so it's no good. Hence why I do the flipping first before I do the import, and then I don't have to worry about playing around with MC Edit and its clearly broken feature there. So if I just undo that, we'll keep everything exactly as it is, and then click Confirm, and it actually appears in the game this time, so it's exactly what we need. And before we close this, we just need to hit Save. And now I've loaded back up in Minecraft 1.12, we can open the import world and start creating the structure blocks. The next thing we need to do is grab the structure blocks. You'll find that you won't be able to find these in this section here anywhere. So if we go to search, type structure blocks, they're not there. So the way to do it is to say /give your player name structure_block, and it will appear in your hand. So now we're going to use the structure blocks to copy this picture. So what we want to do is go to the bottom left corner and place the first block. Going to then right click on it, switch to the save mode. We'll call our structure something useful. I'm going to go with wow because that's what we're building, and then a hyphen B1. The B stands for bottom because we're on the bottom layer, and the 1 is because we're in the first position on the bottom layer if we need to do more. That means that when we go to import it on the other side, it's going to be very easy to bring these structure blocks back in without having to figure out what we named everything. The relative position needs to be changed to 0, 0, and -1. That's assuming that we're facing in the same direction. The first two zeros are the X and Y coordinates because we're in the same X and Y position where this side of the structure block lines up to the side of the structure that we're building, and the bottom for the Y is aligned with the bottom. The Z coordinate is 1 bar over. And we need to remember that. It's just easy to keep this consistent for every time we do a build. The structure size then is going to be 32, 32, and 1. And that's again, it's 32 on the X-axis, that's the left to right, 32 on the Y-axis, that's up and down, and then 1 deep, because it's only 1 Z block deep. Then we hit save. Now that we've done that, we just need to do that again and again to cover this entire structure. So we'll do one more here. Wow B2. The same structure size, etc. And then save. And now that we have all of those structures, we just need to move them over to our 1.13 world before we can import them. Now you need to go into your Minecraft saves folder. This might be different for you if you've installed Minecraft in a different location or if you're using a mod loader or that kind of thing. So make sure you do a bit of a Google search and find where the location is for you if you can't find it on your computer. So we're going to go into the import world folder, into structures. And here are all the structures that we've created. I'm just going to copy all of the WoW ones that we've made. And then we're going to go back to our WoW world. And we need to create a different folder because the folder location of structure blocks in Minecraft 1.13 is not the same as in previous versions. There's a great article on the wiki. If you search for structure blocks on the Minecraft wiki, you will find these locations where the default locations of them are. So we're going to create a folder called generated, and then inside there another one called Minecraft, and then inside there a final one called structures, and then we're going to paste our structures into here. And that's all we need to do to get them into the Minecraft 1.13 world, and we just need to load up that version of Minecraft and import them. We're back in our world now and we're going to place our structure block down, so just going to try and find the best location. Usually I'll get this wrong, but what I try and do is locate it so that it's in the distance facing away from the button and at a good distance that we can get the whole thing in if we sort of float up into the sky a little bit. So let's go forward a little while. I think that'll do for a good first start. We just need to grab our structure blocks. So let's throw that away. / give getters structure block. Again, it's a lot easier to do in Minecraft 1.13 because you don't have to know what it is you're going to type. You can just sort of use the autocomplete feature to do it for you. Now that we have our structure block, I'm just going to go down here a little way and place the first one. And we're going to actually use this as the second one, not the first in the bottom row, because we want the bottom row to be a bit longer. It's going to extend a bit more off to the left, but we're going to use this as our first marker. So we're going to go to load and type wow B2, and we're going to set the relative position exactly as it was in the import world to 0, 0, and -1. If we click load the first time, it doesn't actually load the blocks in, but it sets out an outline of exactly what it's going to do, so you can verify what you're going to do before you accidentally import something and overwrite something you might have already built in your world. So then you just have to go in and click load again and it pops in. Now we need to go 32 blocks to the left and do the next one. We're on -14 here, so 32 blocks away is -46. Going along, just trying to trace to make sure that I'm on the same level, so this is in line. I'm going to do the same. We're going to go into load, structure name wow B1, load, and if I've done it right, that shouldn't overlap. It looks good to me. You would be able to see a white line sort of here overlapping the next section, or you'd see the gap here where you hadn't quite got it right. So if you do need to, just break the block, adjust it, and try again. And load. And there we go. So there is B1, B2, and all I need to do now is carry on filling these in until I've done them all. And there we have it. So we've imported the entire thing in the world now. It's time to clear up these structure blocks. And then let's go and take a look at how it looks from our starting button. I like to position myself right on the center block here, turn around, and let's have a look. If you press F1 at any time, you can hide the interface as well, just get a good look. It's not quite central, so what I'd like to do is move it over slightly. This is where it can get a bit tricky, and you find yourself using the clone command quite a bit to move things around. There's a little trick with the clone command, which I'll show you now. So let's get to the top of the structure first, because we need to find the coordinates that we want to clone. So let's press F3, /clone, -46, which will stay the same. We need to put the Y coordinate down to 4 because we need to actually clone from the bottom layer, and then -197 for the Z coordinate. Now let's go over to the other end. And what I did was highlight and copy the clone command without actually entering it in because it's not complete yet. And then I can paste it back into the chat to carry on. So now we're going to clone up until 80 and 99, so that covers the whole bottom of the structure at level 4 all the way up to the top at level 99, and then -197, that one stays the same. And then we need to choose the coordinates that we want to go to, and so let's copy that again. So I think this is probably slightly too close, so I'm going to move it slightly further back. I also want to move it to the left a while so that the face is centralized on this camera position. So we're going to just have a guess and say move it about 10 blocks to the left, so that would be to -56. This coordinate that we're setting here is always the lowest coordinate of the X, the Y, and the Z values. So the Y is going to stay the same at 4. The X coordinate where you've put -56, which is the lowest of all of the values, and then the Z coordinate we're going to put slightly back a bit. So it's currently at -197, so to go further back we need to change that to about, let's say -202, move about 5 blocks. You don't actually need to move the Z coordinate very much for it to make a big difference. So before we execute that command, we just need to make a bit of an addition to it by saying we're going to have masked move. Now by adding masked move on the end, it doesn't do a clone as sort of a copy where you'd end up with 2 versions of it. It will do a complete move, so you'll only end up with the final version. So that's moved the entire thing. I think that looks way more central than it did before, and it looks like it's in a good distance as well from the camera. And to clean it up a bit, we're going to extend the sides slightly so that we don't see the sky and the ground behind. So we're going to use our last clone command to get the correct starting coordinates by getting rid of these. Remember, we moved it to -56 for -202. And instead of clone, we're going to use a fill command. That will be the starting coordinate, so we're just going to drop that down slightly lower, it's 57, because -56 is actually part of our structure already. And we're going to go a bit lower on that and say to -65, this is just a guess at this point. And position 99, because we know it's 99 blocks tall, sorry, it's not 99 blocks tall, it's 96 blocks tall, but at level 99 is the height. And then minus 202 again, because we only wanted that one depth. And we're going to fill with black wool. That didn't do nearly as much as I wanted, so we're just going to extend that out a bit more and say to minus 90, and that's cleared off that side of the screen. If we go back to our clone command again, remember the original position ended at x coordinate 80, and we moved it 10 over, so that means it now finishes at x coordinate 70. So we're going to carry on with our clone command and fill from 71 to 85 with more black wool. And that's finished off the other side. And now if we press F1, we've got a perfect image on the screen. So now we have our pixel art, we have our song. The only thing left to do is record it. I'm not going to add that into this video because obviously there is the recorded version available for you to watch. But I will show you how I do the last bit of editing so you can see how I get to the finished video. I'm here now in Lightworks, which is the editing software that I use. There are dozens of different types of software that can do all of this kind of thing, so I'm not promoting this one or saying it's the best one. It simply is the first one that I actually came across that had a free edition. I've since switched to the professional version and got the license for myself because I actually did find myself quite liking it. This is not an endorsement, it's just the one that I use. I'm not going to go through this software in great detail, but I'm just going to explain a few of the steps that I do to get a new song edited and recorded, ready to be uploaded for YouTube. First, I need to create a new bin, and I'm going to call this NB for note block, because I didn't know what else to call it. This is totally up to you and totally random. And this is Post Malone Wow. Inside our bin, I'm going to create a new empty sequence. This is going to be our container for everything that we're going to export and upload. Now I'm going to import the recording of this song by dragging and dropping. That doesn't put it into the sequence, it just puts it in this bin, so I've got a collection of all the things we're going to work with for this. First, I'm going to uncouple the audio because I have separate tracks. I'm going to switch them so that they are both not left and right audio tracks anymore, but they are both center tracks. We then need to import our intro by dragging that in. And this just saves a bit of time, and all it does is add that onto the video. Then we go back into our bin, and I'm going to drag my recording into the video too. And if I zoom out a little way, you'll see where the track starts. And this is the audio that I recorded. Now, I did actually have to do it in a few takes because I don't get things right every time. Since this making of video is very largely unscripted, you'll probably notice a lot of edits and cuts across the course of the video and little jumps and things in places. And that's just because I've tried to cut out some of my stuttering or bad speech and things like that. So I'm not actually as perfect as it might sound if you listen to the video all the way throughout. There's probably about 3 or 4 times as much footage actually taken out because I've been choking on my own words. So I'm going to cut out those bad parts of the recording now. We just zoom in. That one was a failure. That one was a failure. You can see I usually leave a few seconds before I start recording again just so I can spot them more easily. So that's totally cut out. The recording on the bottom is the song, so that's all the game audio, and everything on this A1 track is everything that was recorded on the microphone. I mute my microphone whilst I'm recording these songs because there's nothing I actually can add over the top of it, so there's no point keeping that in at all. So you'll see that it'll be completely flat until the end, and also the game sound is playing all the way throughout until the end where it's completely flat, and that's not because the game sound is then muted, it's actually just because there is no sound coming from the game. I'm just going to add one of the last elements onto the video now, which is the cover picture, which you'll see in the fade out, and we're going to cut that track down to see what it is. I usually do then change that last bit so it's about 3 seconds, so it's not dragging on for ages and ages. So if we look, the current time in the video is 2 minutes 56.54. That 0.54 is the number of frames at 60 frames per second, so 54, so it's very nearly a second. And I'm just going to drag the end of the track a little bit, so there'll be about 3 seconds there or thereabouts. I don't tend to do it precisely. somewhere around there is totally fine. And then close it up again, and that will be the length of our final video. One thing I like to do in the intros is have a little snippet of the song playing at the beginning at a slightly quieter tone and sort of fading in and fading out again. So let's go and find a suitable portion of the song that we can do for that. I'm going to switch to the log tab, and then we've loaded our recording up, and all I need to do is play it and find a good section. That probably sounds like a good enough place. All I need to do is put a snippet about there. Gonna let that play for a few seconds. And I'm using the I and O keys to just place a little snippet there. And then I'm going to press the U key, which is a custom key binding for myself, which takes a snippet. What you can actually do is right click and go make subclip, and that does the same thing. Then I need to drag this subclip into our bin. Switch back to edit mode. And I need to create a new video and audio track, otherwise we'll accidentally overwrite what we've already done. And then drag our recording in. Once it's in, I can actually delete 2 of the tracks because we don't need those anymore. Now I'm going to head to the audio tab and play with the volume, because we want this to sort of fade in and fade out a bit. So around here, I'd say it would be nice for it to be at full volume. Just going to click on the audio levels and drag down so it will fade in. And it would probably be nice for it to fade out by about this point as well. But we do also want it to play at 100%, which is 0 decibels. Sometimes I think it fades out a bit too fast, so I'll tend to extend these out slightly, add a bit more of a curve to the fade out. And also I'm just going to adjust the audio level here because it's slightly too high. And we can do that by setting a gain on the entire track to -10. And that's the audio for the intro completed. We're just going to make sure we've got the right sound level in the rest of the track. So I'm going to enter somewhere where the levels are about the highest they are, so around here. And then we're looking up here to see how high things go. And we've got a little bit of room, so we're going to increase the gain by about 3. And listen to that again. You can see we're getting much closer up to this level. If we go too high, it will distort the audio, and we want to avoid that if we can. Finally, we need to add the wipes and the transitions in the recording. Because I had to cut out the failed recordings of the song, I'm going to just add a small transition here. So we're going to add something which is centralized on that position and a dissolve. And we're going to add another dissolve at the end of the track, but it's going to go to that final position. That just dissolves into the outro. And towards the start of the track, we're going to do our wipe into the middle. So that's from that position, add our wipe. I'm going to change that to a circle, reverse direction. And that's it, that is the editing done. The final thing for me to do is to output this so that it's in a format I can upload to YouTube. So I'm going to select the entire thing, right click, export, and there is a YouTube option, but actually I've tuned the settings a bit better in the H.264 version here. That will take a little while, but when it's done, we'll have a quick look at the final output and just make sure that it's correct. And there we have it, the finished recording of the song ready for uploading to YouTube. I hope you found this making of video useful. If you have any questions or you feel there's anything I could go into a bit more detail about, feel free to drop them in the comments section below. Thanks for watching and take care.